Would you consider yourself a hero? And if not, then why not? I mean, what is a hero after all? Well, for starters, we can all agree that a hero is one who acts heroically. Which begs the question, of course, what is a heroic act anyway? Looking at our stories, one might get the impression that the answer differs greatly from culture to culture and from one age to the other. But what if underlining these differences lied even greater similarities? And what if, by connecting these similarities together, we end up with one single story? A story of a journey that takes the hero away from his homeland and into a surreal world of adventure, where he will find an old magician who will help him overcome impossible odds until the hero will return back to his homeland with a treasure and reclaim his throne. And what if we try to reenact this journey through one of its best incarnations, the story of Jason and the Argonauts, using the wisdom of one of the most beloved scholars of myth in the 20th century, Joseph Campbell. Campbell wrote his famous book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, in 1949, the year my father was born, which now seems like a long time ago. Yet his words are as powerful as ever, because what Campbell claimed to be the basic pattern underlining all hero stories, he also showed to be the story of our lives. Yes, our somewhat banal and often boring lives of 9-to-5 office work and TV shows. Because everyone is a hero at his birth, Campbell said, almost astonished at his own words. From the liquid paradise of our mother's womb and into this vale of tears, where we so often find ourselves lost, fallen, and desperate to connect with an ultimate reality. And it's from here that, according to Campbell, each one of us must undergo another journey, a hero's journey that will not only redeem his life, but also that of his community, his tribe or race or whatever is understood throughout the ages. Back in ancient Greece, and before Odysseus began his famous journey back to Ithaca, another sailor gathered the most celebrated warriors of his country and began his journey to what must have been the other side of the world, a place called Kolchis in the Black Sea, where a great treasure, the Golden Fleece, taken from a magical ram that was sent by Zeus, still hanged from an oak tree guarded by a dragon. And according to Campbell, this journey, known as the Argonautic Expedition, goes across not only the far edges of Greek geography, but of our own psyche, our soul, in search of a treasure that lies deep in here. The hero's journey is traced in a circle, for the hero's task is not only to leave his place of birth and seek adventure, but to return back with a glorious treasure. Often, we find that our hero is born a prince, descended from a noble king, but robbed of his rightful place by a relative. This, according to Campbell, is not random, as deep inside we all feel like we came from somewhere else, from another world perhaps. And he observed that many children will often pass through a phase where they become convinced that their parents are not their real parents. This curious little fact, he argued, was telling of the deep conviction, one that we all share on different levels, that our true being is spiritual, but finds itself in exile and away from its rightful kingdom, the kingdom of our Father. In the case of Jason, it was his uncle who took away his throne, forcing his mother and himself into hiding. There, in the wilderness, the boy would grow into a man and eventually return to reclaim his rightful throne. But his uncle, still in power and eager to keep it, sets for Jason an impossible task: to bring back the Golden Fleece belonging to a ruthless king in faraway Kolchis, guarded no less by a fearsome dragon that never sleeps. It doesn't take a theologian to recognize here a trace of the Garden of Eden. But perhaps it takes one to remind us that two were the forbidden trees in that heavenly garden. One, from which the firstborn ate against the will of God, was the tree of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, of duality, of separation, which brought us here into this earthly exile. The other, however, was the tree of immortal life, symbolized here by the golden fleece, that much like the Holy Grail represents an ultimate object, what Psychonaut Terence McKenna called the transcendental object at the end of time. The journey, of course, would be almost impossible and was in fact designed to send Jason to his death. But heroes are never without companions, and just like young Arthur found his knights, Jason would call on the best heroes of ancient Greece, who would answer his call to adventure. Hercules arrives to join the crew, and so does Orpheus, the mythic lyre player. The two sons of Boreas, the north wind, who are endowed with the gift of flight. Peleus, the father of Achilles, also joins, along with Telamon, who would father mighty Ajax. The ship from which the voyage took its name was called Argo, built with the guidance of Athena, goddess of craft, to withstand the most perilous waters. And its sailors would become the Argonauts. Hearing some of their names, like that of Achilles' father Peleus, and while Campbell stressed that stories like this one do not happen in our historical time, but in a mythic time all their own, we understand that, at least for the Greeks, this voyage took place just before the War of Troy. The heroes pour tributes to the gods and push the mighty vessel Argo into the sea, their moves coordinated by the music of Orpheus, who sings of the beginnings of the world. Clearly, we are in ritual space here, and faraway Kolchis lies as much on the edge of the Black Sea as it does in the farthest reaches of our inner space. Campbell observed that once the hero leaves his known world, he enters a magical one where the true adventure begins. But before, he must first cross a threshold somewhere between these two. This threshold is the last attempt of his community to hold him back, to bind him into their world of everydayness and away from his true calling. In our life, this might take the form of a job offered to us by one of our relatives, or even a marriage that will bind us forever into what we already know. For Jason, this was the island of Limnos, where he disembarked with his Argonauts on his way to the Straits of the Bosporus. Limnos, however, was no ordinary island, but one with a dark secret. During reconnaissance, one of Argo's sailors could see no man walking the city, but only women, both young and old, while a queen, Ipsipili, meaning high gate, sat on the island's throne. The secret will soon be revealed, as the women had killed their husbands, together with every male child, and after the men had dared to replace them with slaves taken from a raid. Jason, as a hero does, is not dismayed and decides to go and meet the queen in person, dressed, of course, as a king. And so, the poet says, Jason wears an embroidered cloak with all the symbols of this sexual drama, where Eros and Thanatos meet as Aphrodite, goddess of sexual desire, is depicted, holding in her slender right hand the shield of her lover, Ares, god of war, while her dress has slipped from her right shoulder, exposing her soft breast, white as milk, that is seen reflected from the inside on the hard metal of Ares' shield. Meanwhile, the queen, and as we understand for the first time after the atrocious murder, is advised by an old lady to change her mind and take in the newcomers. Our daughters, she says, are watching their hair turn gray without ever knowing the love of a man or child. Who is going to take care of them when their arms are too weary to stir the plow and sow the earth? Through the dark sky of night, the poet tells, shines a red star, one that young girls know to look for through the comely windows of their houses, one that brings memories of lovers who are now far away, strangers among strange lands. And this is how Jason appeared in his shimmering red cloak as he walked towards the queen, and she opened the high gates of Limnos for the Argonauts to come through and live among the women. The curse was lifted and the island rejoiced. We must put ourselves into the shoes or perhaps beds of these young sailors, weary from traveling and eager for a home, only to find themselves made kings and guardians of a small island all their own. But if that was all it took for a journey, these sailors would not be much of a hero. The true kingdom lies unclaimed and the treasure still unconquered. So what happens next? You need to stay tuned for the second part of this heroic journey to find out.